15 days to get started with your art career. And luckily, I'm here to help you with that. Welcome to the Graybox, a completely free online digital art academy where every single week, you, me, and everyone else get together and learn together. Today, we're focusing on the dream of a stellar portfolio. Ooh, you want it so bad, but be patient. The portfolio itself will come later, whereas this video is going to focus on building up to starting the portfolio. If you're doing this digitally, make sure you get acquainted with your art software. Just try out some brushes, and if there's anything that looks nice, maybe use that to inspire yourself. Right now you're practicing. This is the perfect time to just procrastinate. I know you're excited, but remember to take 15-minute breaks as frequently as possible, excessively even. Burnout is incredibly dangerous, and while you might seem passionate about trying to learn art, the world is your oyster, but don't let it burn. The last thing you want is for it to suddenly stop 3 years in due to complete and utter burnout. Now, on to day one. For now, we're focusing on just drawing some stuff, some really simple stuff. So let's start. Draw a cat, draw an eye, draw a car. You might be wondering, how on earth is this going to get me to a professional portfolio? Well, understand what your practice is giving you. The one thing that all of these have in common is that they are simplified, and that's good. You did a great job. The eye is not something that's easy to draw. A car is most certainly not. Mechanical parts are some of the most difficult things to draw, but you simplified it into a few blocks. And a cat is a complex creature, but you simplified it into this cute, wonky little face. Simplification is one of the major keys to being able to draw literally anything ever. When I say anything, I mean anything. In order to get my point across, let's get on to another thing. Let's study this right here. This was a sketch I did years ago, based on the Tianji Mountains in China. But this looks like a complex black and white sketch, at least if you're just starting out. But realistically, it's all just a bunch of shapes. Let's just make it as simple as possible, right? We got these mountains right here in the front, and then we got another layer right behind it, and a big tree root just going across like a bridge. Now, it all looks really flat, but the moment we start adding some white fog to it, it gains a whole lot of depth, and you can start to understand what the image is. This is the way that we all see it in the professional art scene. You break everything down into the simplest of forms before you add any sort of detail. When you draw a human, you draw a stick figure. People use that as an excuse to say, oh, I'm so terrible at art, I'll never learn. I promise you, you are lying to yourself by saying that. So, this is what your practice is doing for you. Every single professional artist has to trample back, simplifying every single subject into several individual shapes. The more shapes you add in, the more complex it can be. And eventually, the shapes are all going to be in your brain's catalog, and you will never, ever have to actually draw them out. You can just get started drawing a subject in any shape or form, in any angle, any rotation, and any lighting. Try this out, practice it a little bit. And for day two, we're gonna work on perspective. Now we get to the classics. Draw a square. Then draw a square with a high point and a low point in the middle. Now you've got different perspectives, and the square has very quickly changed identity to now become a cube. Draw a door. Just a regular door, just a little rectangle and a circle. And if you want, you can add some extra stuff to the handle if you're feeling fancy. Now, next to that drawn door, add another rectangle right next to it. A very skinny one, but very tall. Draw another rectangle next to that one, a little bit shorter than the previous one. Now, I want you to connect these two, like so. Well, now you have an open door. By taking two shapes and connecting them, it created the illusion of one particular shape rotating in space. A lot of people just draw things and they don't pay attention to where they're progressing. Now you've already progressed significantly faster than most have in over 3 years. So you just used two techniques that are used by industry professionals. Last time we focused on shapes. This is called perspective and foreshortening. Foreshortening is when an object has a visual morph as it rotates toward or away from the onlooking eye. Interestingly enough, a lot of that information kind of just gets cut off by other pieces of the same object. And perspective has a massive impact on how much foreshortening should be done. Like how film cameras can sort of distort objects that get too close. So, let's break it down. Now, there are some main components that comprise a really professional looking drawing, being the concept, composition, the perspective, and the execution. This is your lens, this is your perspective, and this is your self-expression being poured into your first project. All of these things call back to what resonates with you. Now, we're not done with day 2. I want you to focus on applying what you just learned here to the drawings that you did yesterday. So for the car, let's add a little bit of perspective. Take the exact same shape, but just morph it a little bit, rotate it in space, and try to capture what that looks like. Same thing for the eye, give it a try. Just draw it from a slightly different angle, like so. You can even copy this one, it's fine. I don't bite. This is what we do as professionals all the time. Already, we're on the right track, so give yourself a pat on the back. Now we're finished with day 2, but we'll revisit perspective for a part 2 and even a part 3. Day 3, highlights, midtones, and shadows. This can be quite difficult for new artists to understand, and for good reason. Allow me to break it down. Light is really cool. It actually allows us to see color, and even the objects here on Earth, as the moon reflects onto its surface, bounce the light off of themselves to illuminate the surrounding area. Highlights are where the light hits directly in its strongest form. Shadows take place when the light is obstructed by the existence of an object, and light can often bounce into shadows, but shadows will always exist. Midtones is the nice little gray area, sort of like when you stand under a tree in a hot, blazing summer day. This is a generally illuminated area that doesn't really have light that's hard enough to generate shadows. Basically, the light bounce between highlights and shadow create midtones, and it's a nice respite from everything else. But it will have ambient occlusion. It's just when two objects get a little too close to each other, they start to darken the values between each other as they reach closer and closer and closer. Now, of course, this doesn't happen if both of those objects just happen to be light bulbs. Now, for day 4, I want you to apply lighting and perspective in an engaging way to you. Day 5 is values mostly, and a little bit of composition. So, congratulations, the curse has been lifted. You're now able to understand the off-screen workings of a professional art piece. And with that, I want you to research some of your favorites. Just go into ArtStation, DeviantArt, Pinterest, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. Just grab one. Find the shapes, check out the perspective, and observe the foreshortening, the lighting, everything. And take notes, most importantly. Notice that there is a pattern and a formula that most professional artists follow when concepting an art piece. It's called composition, a combination of all the things you've learned thus far. And we did talk about this a little bit in day 2. For day 6, kind of do the same, but let's go over it again. Shapes, foreshortening, perspective, light, shadow, and value. These are the most important things to a composition, and value is achieved through colors and shades. This formula is how the artist decides to express the painting before even getting to the colors. Most of the time, the composition is decided in black and white grayscale. It applies not only to illustrative works, but also character art in general, and we'll get into that in week 2. Day 7, learning shape language in composition. So firstly, take the day off. Come back to this timestamp at the end of the day because you've earned it. Now, shape language is something that's very interesting. In composition, it's highly important. Shape language will tell you where to look when you first glance at an image. Every single art piece will do this, whether you realize it or not. This can be done through the curvature of a tree, or maybe you can tilt a tree rather than have it curve. Maybe the land itself, landmarks placed upon it. A character pointing to an object in the distance. This is all part of shape language, and it tells your eyes immediately where to go to when you first glance. Some of the best examples of this are made by Riot Games with the League of Legends and Wild Rift splash art teams. They are insanely talented with what they do, and they are amazing at getting your eyes to look where they want you to. The final day of week 1, first of all, congrats, you've made it really, really far. And even if you feel like you're falling behind, this video is eternal. So you could always come back to it and ask questions in the comments or in the community tab. Trust me, I do look. So if you're ever feeling confused, just come back, ask me about it, and maybe I can help. Now, we're getting into week 2, but before we get to day 8, I know you're feeling it. Remember to stretch your fingers and keep taking those 15-minute breaks, drink water, check your posture. Do not continue drawing if your hands and fingers are in pain. Allow this to be fun for yourself. While the goal is 15 days, you can take this at your own pace, and don't let me rush you. Enjoy your time. Now, on to day 8. Today we're learning environment and hard surfaces, specifically before we learn characters, and for good reason. For both of these, I would highly recommend studying real photos. For environments, look at cultural architecture and modern architecture, even medieval. This helps a lot if you want to make something purely based in fantasy. It requires a lot of creativity, and for creativity, you need to have a big catalog of things so you can start to imagine more. Hard surfaces are a little bit difficult to paint, but the most important thing to remember is that if you're planning to have different materials in your art piece, shade differently for those materials. So if you're lighting a stone wall, make sure you have some divots, some cracks where the light isn't exactly hitting. This gives it that authentic feel. Metal is highly reflective, so if you took a mirror and bent it, it would still show a very distorted but equally recognizable image of what looks like your body stretched across it and the entirety of the surrounding environment based off of what is behind you, the viewer. Wood isn't very reflective at all, and the only time it is when water has been saturating it. So just keep that in mind. At the end of the day, I want you to study some professional environment portfolios and try breaking down their processes. Trace if you must, but don't publish that as your own art if you do, and find the shape languages and the composition. That's your challenge for day 8. Day 9, we're focusing on characters. Finally, characters are smaller, but equally as important as the surrounding environment in an illustration. Character design, while it relies on an environmental foundation, in most cases is a thing on its own, but we'll save that for another video. Here, we're understanding how to draw one in the first place. Character silhouette is highly important, but in order to even get started, you gotta know how to draw humans. Drawing humans and characters is a very complex thing to do, but we'll start with ideally just a stick figure, okay? Let's not get too ambitious here. To end the day, I want you to draw a character next to a bigger or smaller shape. This character doesn't have to be very detailed at all. For day 10, we're going into perspective grids. Finally, we're revisiting perspective for a round 3. Perspective grids are hard to even understand how to start. When you look at a perspective grid, it just is a bunch of lines and a bunch of mess. But this is used by industry professionals to be able to determine where their lines should meet up. The interesting thing about painting and illustration is that there will always be a horizon line somewhere, whether it's above, below, captured within the canvas or not. The horizon line will always exist, and it will always be the dictator for what structures should look like in perspective. This is the entire reason why perspective grids are used, and the only way that I have found to be able to understand them just a little bit better and be able to actually start drawing one. Let's practice with a square. Vertical line should go down the middle and the horizontal part, just easily like that. This could take a bit of practice to actually get used to, and that's fine. Don't let it bog you down, don't let it knock you down, don't let it get you discouraged. Take breaks if you're struggling with it and come back to it later. None of this information is ever going to disappear, so you can always come back to it. And I will constantly be expanding on it as this channel grows. I want you to end the day by drawing a small circle of environmental floor around the character you drew yesterday, and add a shadow cast if you haven't already. Just a simple cast shadow. Don't worry about the shading or anything like that. Just cast a shadow onto the surrounding environment circle and you're good to go. For day 12, I want you to take the day off. 3 days remain, and by God, you're doing so well, I just might cry. I am so proud of you. This day is not optional. Take the day off and reflect on everything. Make additional notes if you haven't already, and most importantly, allow all of this information to sink into your brain and process it in your downtime. Trust me, it'll help a lot to just take a day off and reflect. And if you really want, you can add in some extra practice by just sketching some things that you think might be fun to sketch. Try not to spend too much time on anything, okay? On to day 13. Today we're focusing on thumbnailing. This is a practice used in professional art, especially in environment concepting and just generally concepting anything at all. Iteration and thumbnailing is highly important. Apply everything you have learned thus far as efficiently as possible, and I'll walk you through how. I want you to sketch 3 alternative shape compositions within the bounds of 3 or more drawn rectangles that take up no more than 1/10 of your canvas. This creates 3 mini canvases that minimize your workspace and reduce the time you spend drafting. This is highly important to workflow, and this will help you a lot in the industry. Keep it simple, work only the biggest shapes in, and for my digital students, zoom in no more than about 150% of the canvas scale. Keep it simple. The further away you are, the less reasoning your brain will have in trying to convince you that you have to spend time on details. We're getting to the last days now. Day 14, outfit design. I know, this is a curveball, but just hear me out. Before we get to actually draw characters, I want you to start drawing some clothes. And not only clothes, this gives you a nice little sense of drawing props as well. So start by researching tools, gear, and objects that are relevant to your environment, whatever you can think of in your head. Really give it thought. Are there bushes and briars in the surrounding environment? Well, maybe you should add some leather protective gear for whoever's wearing this outfit. Is this place high in the sky, or maybe it's under the sea? Well, an oxygen tank would be great for both of those, or an opening for gills to breathe for aquatic hybrid characters maybe. Oh, it's a treehouse? Well, climbing gear should most likely be present. And at the end of the day, I want you to design an outfit that is shaped like a tool. Try to nail down that silhouette. You want to make an outfit that looks like a monkey wrench? Well, draw a monkey wrench and then try to draw an outfit around it. Stuff like this really helps you understand how you can modify a silhouette for a more interesting looking character, or even just an interesting looking outfit. Get some food, get some water, check your posture, and make sure you take those breaks, okay? Practice. We'll get there eventually. Day 15. Holy moly, you've made it. Thank you for choosing the Graybox today. Start today and allow this next project to continue over the next 2 days. So 3 days total, today, tomorrow, and the day after. You created thumbnails yesterday. Revisit them. Whichever one appeals to you the most, use that as your final illustration. Block in the shapes and get started. Research your references, get inspired by pros, and really make use of your learnings here. In illustration, patience is the one thing that will make or break a quality piece. Don't rush, erase elements that don't work, and delete the entire thing if you feel the need to, and start from the beginning again. When you completely recreate an artwork, while understanding what went wrong and how your practice has been helping you, it can only get better and better with each and every time. Regardless of your progress on this piece, take breaks excessively. Revisit your notes, revisit this video, and stop drawing at the day's end. Get some rest and continue tomorrow. Professionals do this all the time. Do not ruin your workload, and do the same thing until the day after and the third. I really hope this helped you to achieve a level of art quality that is closer to starting your own professional portfolio in less than 15 days. I'm still learning how to be a teacher, so if you want to see me grow and learn some stuff in the process, hey, come back next week. The last thing I want is you feeling like you wasted your time. Take care, and I'll see you guys next week.